Today on The Independent, former Notre Dame linebacker Joe Schmidt joins the show to talk about Notre Dame's outstanding defensive play so far this season. Plus, Pete and I preview the Wake Forest game and talk about the home stretch of Notre Dame's season. Welcome to the latest episode of The Independent. I'm Pete Sampson of The Athletic, joined by my colleague Matt Fortuna of The Inside Zone. Thanks for being with us. A reminder, you can follow and subscribe to this podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Also, we've got a YouTube stream. Please subscribe, like there. It helps with the visibility of the show. More people can find out about The Independent. So we appreciate all listeners that we picked up this season. It's been a fun ride that we're kind of into the home stretch here, Matt. Final home game of the season this week before the trip out to California, where you actually are now.
I'm trying to figure out how to get the Pac-12 network so I can watch that Stanford game in 2 weeks.
I thought you were trying to break some Chip Kelly news or something in Los Angeles, but
nothing yet. I did report that last night, contrary to what else was out there.
But yeah, Notre Dame wraps up the home slate of the season on Saturday against Wake Forest, which you may or may not know is where Sam Hartman spent the last 5 years. Notre Dame will be down starting guard Rocco Spindler. Not clear if starting center Zeke Correll will be able to go. And like, I mean, I think from Notre Dame's point of view, it's been a long couple weeks. Like the second bye week did not come at a good time because I think that they had to sort of live with the Clemson loss for 14 days now. And that I think even Freeman, when he came in for his press conference on Monday, it was a lot. I mean, you've been to many of these Brian Kelly pressers. It was a string of like something. Why is X going wrong? Explain why it's not working. And then we just went through the list, whether it's play action or the quarterback play or the receivers or special teams. Like it sort of feels like it's a little bit of everything. And this season has been a weird one because I mean, they're probably going to go 9-3, but I'm not sure it will have felt like a 9-3 season. You know what I mean? Like it feels like it's just the season that wasn't quite what people wanted it to be or what it should have been.
It would be an unfulfilling 9-3. I agree. And you guys will hear from Joe Schmidt shortly. He went out of his way to say, like, look, that Ohio State game is going to haunt those guys forever. And it will. And it's not just that Ohio State game. Although, again, I think everything from narrative to the trajectory to the way the outside world sees this program, everything changed. I mean, until last night, Ohio State was the number one team in the country, due in large part to the fact that Notre Dame had 10 men on the field. And that's why. The Louisville game, right, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Ron English is up for the Broyles Award this year. I think, and even though they put Jeff Brom's picture on the official announcement and not Ron English, I think Notre Dame has a lot to do with that. The Clemson game, which, again, Clemson's a very talented football team. I don't think on its own there's shame in losing to that team, but to look as thoroughly unprepared and unready for the moment when you had a lot to play for still, and to have your 6-year quarterback play as poorly as he did on that stage is very, very disappointing. So I think, yes, Pete, when you look at, assuming they win out here, they go 9-3, assuming they win a non-New Year's Six bowl and go 10-3, which is not nothing. It's still, you look at where, how would it feel, right? And we play this exercise a lot, preseason expectations versus how you actually feel when it's happening. I don't know too many people, short of, again, if they were to somehow end up with LSU in a bowl game and beat Brian Kelly, I don't know too many people who could honestly say, yeah, that felt good. Like this was a great season for Notre Dame football.
Yeah, I think that this season, if they go 10-3 and let's say they're in the ReliaQuest Bowl and like our bowl projections on The Athletic has Notre Dame there against Tennessee. Like if you beat Tennessee, like it would feel like a season that was not a failure by any stretch, but it would be hard to be like, yes, that was a 100% success either. I think it's just going to feel in between.
Tennessee would feel in the exact same boat, by the way, I think, based on the trajectory of their season.
Exactly. And so it'll be interesting to see how, like, I think the team will respond to it. I don't think losing to Clemson is going to have a hangover, but it is a season, like you look at the Broyles Award candidates, Al Golden is on there. Also the defense coordinators of Ohio State, Louisville, Clemson, and Duke. the 4 teams that sort of gave Notre Dame offensive fits this
Tommy
season all
Reese and
made it.
Mike Denbrock as well. We got to mention that.
Tommy Reese and
And
Mike
Tyler
Denmark,
Santucci.
yes.
Oh, you mentioned him, yeah, too. But
Yeah, as the Duke DC one-time brief Notre Dame GA. But yeah, it's going to feel like a season that's just like the almost could have been season. And it's like that's I think one of the reasons this season needed to be just one win better is that next year, and this sort of gets into the senior day stuff and like who's leaving, like there's going to be quite a bit of roster turnover off this year. There's the transfer portal out there, but it's tough to nail Sam Hartman, Javante Jean Baptiste, Thomas Harper. Devin Ford has not been a stat guy, but has been, I think, somebody that Notre Dame is glad that they took. It's hard to get, Spencer Schrader. It's just hard to get 5, 6, 7 impact transfers every year if you're Notre Dame. Next year might be the last year that they can do it because the COVID year is going to be gone. So it just is like when you look at next season already, it's like, man, they got a lot of questions. Quarterback, maybe offensive coordinator. The defensive line could be rebooted entirely if Mills Cross, Jean Baptiste, Jean Botello, or Jordan Botello, like Nana Safamensa, like you could be down 5 guys who have played a ton of football. Never mind like the linebackers, all 3 could be gone. We'll see what Xavier Watts does. It's a lot. I think that sort of has a tinge of like, man, this was a year to kind of go get it, and kind of feels like they're not quite gonna have gotten it.
it's definitely a missed opportunity. Again, like you go back to Ohio State weekend and the events and the Friday shows with Lou Holtz and fake Lou Holtz and the performance for 59 minutes on Saturday. And like just like you could, I think you said this in real time, like you finished a job there and that's that's a landmark win on the field.
Yeah,
And
10-year win.
that's a recruiting win for 10 or 15 years, right? And it didn't happen. It was a missed opportunity, and you don't get those opportunities all that often, especially at home. Like Notre Dame's home schedule
Yeah.
hasn't always been that great for whatever reason, and it's not going to be great next year. Although, be remiss not to mention they will be facing a new rich coach in their opener next year at Texas A&M, which is going to pay $77 million to get rid of Jimbo Fisher. And I'm sorry, I know these guys are competitors. There's got to be at least a part of them that's like, yes, like I'm getting 77 not to work and not to deal with any of this ever again. Like that. I'm sorry, that's amazing. That's
Oh, it's ridiculous.
Auburn paid Hugh Freeze and Gus Malzahn a combined $37 million over the last couple of years and not coach. Those were 2 of the biggest buyouts ever. They're still not even half of what Jimbo's getting in one lump sum, not lump sum payment, but total to not work. It's makes Charlie Weiss's $18 million not to work at Notre Dame
100%. Yeah.
But to your point, it does feel like a missed opportunity. There are coaching staff questions that need to be answered, right? Both good and bad. Will Jared Parker be back as offense coordinator? If not, how does that search unfold? You need a new strength coach. How's that going to change things? Will Al Golden stick around, or will he go become an NFL DC the moment that falls on his lap next year, this offseason? I don't know. It's a lot of changes. And it's a program that, can't just look. I know it's college football in 2023. USC, a lot of other teams Colorado flip their roster like that, and it's nothing. Dave Clawson, head coach of Wake Forest, very similar place in Notre Dame and how it's kind of operates academically, went into great detail this week during his press conference about why he can't just make a quick fix for everything that ailed Wake Forest this year. And he very, very similar to Notre Dame in the sense of you're pretty much limited to sophomores and grad transfers. And you got really nitty gritty about the credits and what transfers and getting people eligible and how much of a pain it is to basically not even bother to recruit guys who might want to come there because you don't know if you can get them eligible and what a waste of time that will be. So it does feel like a missed opportunity again. These are champagne problems. It's Notre Dame. They're going to get good players no matter what. But I thought this was the collection of good players this year that was supposed to not necessarily make the playoff, but at least get to a New Year's Six game and show a major step from last year. And now I think the worst thing these guys could do would be essentially say to themselves, hey, look, next year's a 12-team playoff. We would have been right there if we beat Clemson. Like, I'm not saying they're far, but I don't think it's as simple as that either. Because I think there are dozens of programs in the country right now that could say that. Dozens.
Yeah. I mean,
Not
you
just
attended one of them.
they got a they made an OC change, but there are other. No, I want to go back to that game real quick. Independent Penn State. I say this all the time about Notre Dame and Audric Estime, and I've said it about Alabama and other teams that historically have had great offensive lines. I always say, why would you ever throw the ball? And I get laughed at. You never coach football, blah, blah, blah. All that's true. Sean Moore is being godded up right now for not calling a single play in the second half against a team that was terrible. Michigan should be Penn State by at least 3 touchdowns. They played them essentially to a draw in the second half, and he didn't call a single pass play. So thank you for validating my football belief. Like, run Audric Estime 50 times a game, and Notre Dame will go undefeated this year. Problem solved.
Yeah, I mean that was sort of a talking point this week of like running back usage and like how is this working or not working? And I could see it both ways. Like, I think Estime has been very good. I think that Jeremiah Love is somebody who probably should be playing more anyway. Just kind of different skill set, but I overall just sort of get into the offense a little bit more and like what's going to happen there. It feels like a pass game that's broken down quite a bit. This weekend maybe would be a time to get that back on track. But like as I go through and watch the games and sort of chart the passing windows that Hartman is trying to hit, like on passes that were 5 yards beyond the line of scrimmage or more against Clemson, he was 2 of 13 for 31 yards and a pick. Like that to me says that's not just like your quarterback is struggling or your younger receivers. That's your whole operation to be broken down that much. So, and I don't know like how Freeman sees Parker at this point. I know that they're close personally, but like I don't think that's going to affect the decision a whole lot one way or the other. But I also am sort of like I'm curious how you see this. Like, is there anything you could see in these final 2 games that would make you feel that much different? Or as like
No.
sort of as like we've or is this a settled matter and we're just sort of waiting on a decision?
I think it would be, well, I don't know if it's a settled matter because I don't know what Marcus Freeman's thinking, but I do think, and I don't want to dismiss the importance of winning these next 2 games and playing well,
Yeah.
especially for the seniors. But I think it would be fool's gold if you were to say, hey, they beat Wake 48-0. Everything's like, look at the progress they made. Like, I don't subscribe to that. Like,
I
don't
hate
think
that because like I heard that with Texas A&M, like you got to fire him now because like what if you win the last 2 games and you have to keep him? Like, no, you don't. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. No, well, I think, and we talked a little bit about this with Joe Schmidt during our conversation. At least as long as I've covered this program, the only in-season firing they made, I believe, was Brian Van Gorder.
Great,
right?
Yeah,
And that was necessary. They were 1-3. They had, I mean, it was a broken defense, but it was early enough in the season, and there was a large enough body of work over 2+ seasons that, hey, we got to save this thing. Like, it's not. If Notre Dame made an in-season change, I don't know what that would really solve.
I don't think it would accomplish anything at
I
all.
don't think it accomplished anything. I don't think it accomplished anything for Penn State other than the fact it's like, hey, Drew Aller, we're going to fix this thing. Do not enter your name in the transfer portal. Which is that you don't have that problem with Notre Dame though, because you have a 6-year quarterback, and
that is. I'm just like strategically
anyway.
That makes sense if you look at it that way. Of like, why would you make an in-season change? There has to be some benefit. I can see one at Penn State. Like, I never quite understood the like. Oh, that's got to be it. Like for Parker, like why? It just didn't make any sense. But yeah, they need to win these last 2 games in a bad way. Because you just don't want to be in a position where you're trying to finish with the same record this year as last year, even though your quarterbacks were Drew Pine 1 year and Sam Hartman the next. Like that's just not a look that you can be putting out if you're Notre Dame. Like that's you shouldn't. They should be better than that.
And independent of quarterbacks, again, it's a first-year head coach versus a second-year head coach, and that experience factor matters a lot, even if it's just 1 year. Like the first year is completely different from the second. Sam Hartman did not talk to the media this week, but Dave Clawson did, and he actually had a lot of nice things to say about him. I don't mean actually, but like I thought Clawson might demur and out of gamesmanship and not say anything. He got asked Tuesday about facing Sam Hartman. He said, I quote, I joked with our team today that for 5 years, Sam wore a green jersey and they weren't allowed to hit him. This is the first time any of our defensive guys will be allowed to hit him. I think the world of Sam. Quite honestly, it's hard for me to watch Notre Dame football. That's the Wake Forest quarterback playing for them. He spent 5 years here and did a lot for our program. We're still close. When we beat Pitt, one of the first text messages I got was from Sam. Once the game starts, he's a quarterback for the other team. But it's weird watching somebody who coached for 5 years and did so much for your program line up in a different uniform. But there's zero hard feelings and nothing but love for Sam. We haven't been in touch this week. I'm sure it'll be a little awkward before the game, but after the game, I'll give him a big hug and tell him how much we care for him. I've told him I'll root for him every game this year except for one, and this is the one. End quote.
I mean, you know Dave Clawson way better than I do. That it seems like he's just a very solid individual, right? Like,
He's the most normal human being coaching football now.
And I do think not that Notre Dame should
not to
win.
say he does. He can be very petty. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of stuff to him.
Right. And but I'm just saying, with this weekend, couldn't you see Sam Hartman sort of getting caught up in the moment of this? I think this will be a very Clawson's talking about how it's going to be weird for him. For Hartman, I think it'll just be difficult. I think Hartman could kind of really struggle on Saturday just with this. I don't know of another instance like this that's happened in college football.
Yeah, good question. I'm sure it's happened before. I can't think of too many, but
yeah,
could he get caught? I don't know. I would argue him not addressing it is creating more of an issue because when you lose, you're creating an information void and therefore allowing people like me and you to paint our own pick versions of what might happen. Could he get caught up in it? I mean, it'd be hard not to. Conversely, he's had bad games before this year. Would this be a different bad game? I don't know. Clawson also got asked about and not to make this whole Wake thing, but we've talked a lot about Notre Dame's offense. I thought it was interesting to hear Dave Clawson's perspective on this because he got asked what he's seen different from Hartman on tape this season. And he said, quote, "He's playing a completely different offense. What we do at Wake Forest is very quarterback centric. Everything we did flowed through him. Their offense is different. They have a big offensive line and an excellent tailback. I'm sure he's learned a lot of things that will help his future. They run different protections and checks. I'm sure his football knowledge has grown from learning a different system, but he's still an excellent football player. When I hear people giving him a hard time, where would they be without him? I know that the standard at Notre Dame might be to make the college football playoff, but I still think they're a much better team because they have Sam than they would be without him. When people are critical of him, it bothers me. He's one of ours and always will be. When you watch the tape as a coach and hear the criticism, it's not justified. He's a good player. It'll be awkward pregame, but once the game starts, he's number 10 for the other team. I'm going to worry about our team." End quote.
I mean, I guess I would disagree. Hartman has struggled, and I think that
some of that was the Lou Holtz. How are we ever going to beat these guys? They're all great.
Yeah, I mean, the criticism I think is fair to a point. It's like when that 2 of 13 for passes beyond 5 yards against Clemson. A lot of that's on Hartman. I don't think all of it's on Hartman. I think Jared Parker had a sort of an interesting, revealing bit on Tuesday night when I asked him sort of about the rapport that he has with the receivers, because you and I have texted about this quite a bit. Wake Forest receivers are so much better than what Hartman has had at Notre Dame. And Parker talked about the first pick against Pittsburgh where Rico Flores runs the route incorrectly. And he's like, you got to learn by doing. He's the best. That's who we got to play. But a year from now, that's a touchdown because Flores knows how to run the route better. So that I just don't. I mean, I think Hartman was on the passing end of 18 100-yard games by wide receivers at Wake Forest in his last 2 years, and he's had 0 this year. Pine had 0 last year. The only 100-yard games by Notre Dame players have been tight ends. So Clawson is right. It's a totally different offense. I think the protections and checks have been harder for Hartman to turn into to get fluent in than maybe any I would have expected. But certainly he has not hit the levels that we would have thought, especially after the first 4 games.
Now, I was just going to say that answer sounds a little unsatisfactory, right? Well, next year, that's a touchdown. Well, we're not worried about
who's throwing
it. Right. Who's calling it? I don't know. That's a hypothetical that doesn't really matter. So it's It's interesting. There are a lot more questions and answers right now, I think, which is not really the healthiest place to be on November 15th, entering senior day.
No.
Um, but we'll see. I mean, Wake, God bless them. They've not been good this year at all. Like they need a win out to get bowl eligible, which obviously means they need to win this week against Notre Dame. I have a very hard time seeing that happening. They're starting, I believe, Michael Kern for the first time, a fifth year. They have been banged up at quarterback, but it doesn't excuse how they've been elsewhere. Um, it's been a down year for Wake Forest football. It should be a great opportunity for Notre Dame to go out, for their seniors to go out with a dominant victory. And then they can move forward to next week against Stanford, which, by the way, or the fact that game is going to be on the Pac-12 network, and I believe it's the last broadcast in the history of the Pac-12 network between a team that's going to the ACC next year, by the way, at night, of course.
Yeah, shouldn't the ACC network pick up this game?
You think they do somewhat a solid here? Fubo TV, here we come. Free subscription, I guess, or a free trial with a subscription. That's the only way I know how to get there. There were some YouTube hacks earlier in the year. I think YouTube caught on to that. Like there were times you could type in like USC Fresno State or whoever it was, and there'd be a live illegal stream of it. I've not had luck with those with some other Pac-12 network broadcasts this year. I wonder who's announcing the game. I don't even know who works for the Pac-12 network.
I don't know. It's a good question. That'd be a fun thing to figure out next week. Maybe we'll have it on the podcast. But all right. Well, let's get to our interview with Joe Schmidt, and then afterwards, Matt and I will come back and give picks for the game this weekend. But without further ado, here's former Notre Dame linebacker Joe Schmidt.
One of the best parts of starting the independent podcast was a chance to pick the brands we wanted to work with, and Rowback was at the top of our list. As someone who wears their quarter zips, polos, hoodies, and more, I can tell you the quality, fit, and feel is unmatched. You've seen Rowback on Audric Estime, Michael Mayer, and Kyle Hamilton. You've seen it on fans at Irish tailgates all season long, too. While the gear hasn't turned me into an All-American player or grill master, Rowback is still my go-to when going for a run, taking my kids to the park, or just lounging around the house on the weekends watching football. So make sure you're comfortable throughout the season with Rowback. Go to rowback.com/Irish for 20% off your purchase. That's 20% off for all customers at rowback.com/Irish. Hey, Pete, senior day is approaching at Notre Dame. The temperatures are dropping. The leaves are changing colors. You know what that means?
It's absolutely time for a new hoodie, Matt.
It sure is, my friend. And the great news is that homefieldapparel.com has just what you need if you're a Notre Dame fan. They dig through the archives of history of the Irish to find unique logos, mascots, and moments to make thoughtful designs for Notre Dame fans. The great news for our listeners is that first-time customers can get 10% off their first order using code INDEPENDENT23 at checkout. That's INDEPENDENT23 at checkout for 10% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com.
Matt, what have you always said is my biggest weakness on fall Saturdays?
Well, Pete, I'd say your hair, but who am I to talk? Let's go with your wardrobe.
Harsh but fair.
ESQ outfits over 400 professional athletes, celebrities, and Irish players on game day with bespoke clothing that elevates their game off the field. ESQ sculpts every garment with precision, helping you look your best for work, weddings, celebrations, or in your case, Pete, the press box.
Listeners of The Independent can get 15% off their first online order by using the code IND15 at checkout. That's IND15, or visit them at their Chicago showroom for a full custom look. Head to esqclothing.com to create your perfect fit.
We're now pleased to be joined by former Notre Dame walk-on, former Notre Dame team MVP, former Notre Dame captain, and whatever else he wants to add to that. Joe Schmidt,
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, buddy.
Huge fan of you. You forgot to add that in. So good to see you guys.
I want to leave that to you.
Yeah, exactly. It's me saying it makes it sound even better.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening.
Yeah,
Pete, you.
Well, it's like I think we wanted to have you on a few weeks ago, but you're busy running the world about the defensive game plan after USC, where the fact that they took a guy. I think Caleb Williams is going to finish his college career with like a 90-10 touchdown interception ratio, but he's going to be 2 TDs and 3 picks against Notre Dame, which is wild. So I was just curious, like from a big picture point of view, like Notre Dame's defense, what has impressed you the most about it, and where do you think like the best of it actually is, depending on whether it's the first, second, or third levels?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've had, looking back over the last however many years, I think they've had just an incredible year statistically. I mean, you guys have done a good job, I think, documenting this on Twitter and on here, talking about their rankings relative to the rest of the country. But I just think they've had an incredible year. Obviously, I think you have a few guys at linebacker that are all fifth-year seniors or whatever it is, and a bunch of experience in the heart of that defense. Like, selfishly, as a former linebacker, I want to say that's the biggest impact to the defense. But I think all three levels have played better than I thought they would, and I really give a ton of credit to the back end. And the reason for that is, if you look at the way that Al Golden calls games, he's a very multiple, a lot of disguise, a lot of man, a lot of match coverage in the back end. You cannot do that without corners that are going to play like aggressive coverage and tackle well in space, make plays on the ball. He's got two corners that are doing just a tremendous job of that all year. Obviously, everyone talks about Morrison, and he's had an incredible year. And what he did against Ohio State, I just thought was amazing. But you have that, and then you have two safeties that, one of them has, I don't even know how many interceptions now, but it's like comical at this point how many times he's caught the ball. And he does a bunch of fun stuff in disguising. And so I give a bunch of credit to the back end. And then I think that before the season, there were a lot of people that were pointing fingers at the defensive line, saying like they're not going to generate any pressure, they're not going to stop the run. I think they've done a really admirable job like this entire year. So I think all of it working together has allowed this defense to play to the level that it's played at. But I think it starts in the back end, playing great match coverage, which allows you to do a bunch of exotic things on defense. And obviously, I think there's just great leadership from three guys who have played, how many thousands of snaps now. You're pretty calm at that point.
Joe, when you watch these guys on TV, how much different is what particularly the linebackers are being asked to do relative to what you had to do, which I think was under 2 or 3 different defense coordinators during your 5 years at Notre Dame?
I think Golden's probably closest to, BBG, like rather than, Bob Diaco ran like a 3-4, and we really was a 3-4-4-2-5. But for the most part, we weren't doing a ton of exotic stuff. It was like, we're going to line up and we're going to beat you. And we had some massive human beings up front that allowed us to do that. I think that the BBG defense was a lot more multiple. And so I think that this is closer to an NFL defense than it is, anything else. And I think a lot of times it really is an NFL defense. And so you see a lot of pre-snap movement. You see a lot of disguise. And if you're talking about the USC game plan, you see different things where different people are spying the quarterback. You see the linebackers, doing a bunch of things to make sure that things are confusing for him. A lot of the time that Xavier Watts has had interceptions this year, he's doing things where, he's starting in different parts of the field and then coming in and ratting at the low level, or he's playing like the hole in the robber position at the second level. And so I think that what he's done, and what the kids have done, obviously enabled by the coordinator, has been really great all year. So I think it's pretty. At the end of the day, there's 11 guys in the field. There's only so many types of defenses you can run, and so a lot of it is window dressing before you start to play, and then you can do some clever things, I think, and move people around. But it's all numbers, so I can't say that anything's all that different.
It's interesting when you say it's what Golden's doing reminds you a little bit of BVG. I think people who are listening to this podcast are going to like, oh my God, like that. Yeah, they don't take that as a compliment. And I think when Golden came in here as NFL style stuff, I thought the same thing. Like, they're going to put too much on the defense, and you're going to have a diminishing return on your investment there of what you're putting in. And yet, like, I was talking to a former Notre Dame coach this week, and he said, one of the things when you coach at Notre Dame and you've come from lower level places or other places, you don't realize how smart the kids are here and how much inventory they actually can handle. Like, did you find that to be a real thing? I realized that the BVG stuff didn't work all that well here.
There's a bunch of reasons for why,
but
it didn't work, right?
Do you sort of look at like the guys on the roster, like they actually can handle this high level stuff if they're older. Like, I'm not saying you're going to put a freshman out there and he's going to run this defense efficiently, but like if you're old at Notre Dame, you should be able to be multiple and complex and like have that football IQ work in your favor.
I think that's true. Like, at the end of the day, if you work at it and you study your craft and you watch tape and you're well coached, like you can do this. And so, yes, it is more challenging when you run a multiple, a defense that's very multiple. A bunch of different fronts, a bunch of different pressures, and then a lot of things are just changing things at the line of scrimmage. So I think that's more challenging. I do think that in general at Notre Dame, you get someone who's used to working in that way, right? Like they've been in the classroom, they've studied hard their entire lives. There's that kind of person at Notre Dame. So I would say yes, but I think at the end of the day, it comes down to like how it's taught, right? Like, are we teaching in concepts, or are we making kids memorize things? And it seems to me, I've never been in Al Golden's room. I don't know Al Golden, but like I would assume he's teaching in concepts because they're clearly playing sound football. Obviously there's mistakes here and there, but like that happens. And then I think that the kids, I think they're actually clearly like they're taking this very, very seriously, and they're working at it because they're playing at a high level and doing all the right things. So I don't know. I think I have less tolerance for saying that certain people cannot do this because it's like if you can add, you can play defense. Like if you can count to 3, you can run. You can run the defense. So it's not that challenging in my mind.
Yeah. Ian Williams said something similar when we had him on a couple of weeks ago, just talking about how simple it should be.
Yeah. I mean,
where you just mentioned you don't know Al Golden well. I mean, how different does this Notre Dame football program as a whole look now under a completely different regime compared to when you were there? And I don't know if you've been back much lately. I know you're busy with your
I was
own
there for
life,
SC.
but you were there for USC? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like it's different, and I think that like it continued to be different after I left. Right. I think the BK era and whatever. I don't know what you guys say on this podcast normally about him, but I think it took 6, 7, 8 years to get through all the small changes to the program that he and I'll give Swarbrick a ton of credit here, needed to make to the program. And they're continuing to make them now with, a player's coach, a guy who really understands what needs to be done for the team, to make sure that they're ready to perform at a high level. And so, I went back to, I was at the I think it was a Friday practice of USC. You're in like, I don't know how many NFL training facilities I was in when I were at Notre Dame, but like 20 probably for all the different away games. Are like inside like whatever facility that thing is called is bananas. Like it's so nice, and they're running practice, and you can just tell like the way that they're running things is just a little bit more. It's a different feel. That's what I'll leave it at. So I think that's great, and I think that like they're trying to continue on with what was already started of like bringing people back and bringing much more of the community around. And I love what Marcus Freeman is doing on that front, and Hunter Biven and a bunch of the other guys that are kind of running point on it. So I think that's the stuff that's really changing is like things have gotten even nicer, which helps in recruiting and helps make sure the kids stay fresh all season. But then they're also doing a bunch for community, which is pretty cool.
What about how you've processed this season as a fan now? Like, I think I remember talking to you on the way out and you're like, man, I just get to watch these games like everybody else and scream at my TV and like think about posting something on Twitter and then deleting it before I do. Like what has this season been like as a fan? Because I do think it's been, I think, pretty volatile for people to watch in terms of how high it was at the beginning and how much October felt like a bit of a low. Like what has it been like for you as a former player?
Painful at times.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think, I'm a Southern California person, so I can really be very happy about the outcome against USC. So like that was a tremendous high. It was in October, obviously. So that was great. I think, you talk about beating that team by that margin. Obviously, like it seems like their season has kind of fallen off a little bit after they lost to us, and it is what it is, and they don't really have a defense, unfortunately, for them. But I think that otherwise this season, it still has a ton of promise. And I think it's a really high quality football team. Like we've got a great quarterback. The guy can really move the ball around. He's obviously very savvy. Got a running back who's I wouldn't want to try to tackle him. And that's just one of them. Like there's like 5. It's crazy. So I think that there's a ton of talent, and I think there is still a ton of talent coming back next year. Like I don't know how the portal stuff is going to work itself out, but I still think there's a ton of talent. So I think that's all been fun. It has been frustrating, and I'm sure it's frustrating for the guys on the team, because that you're just so close on so many of these things. Like the Ohio State game, I feel so bad for those guys, because it's going to be something that like haunts them for a very long time. And we lost some games like that, in the last play, at Clemson in the hurricane, and so you never really forget those moments, unfortunately. And then I think there were just a couple ones that you just want back. Something happens, you're kind of off. The Louisville game was such a fluke game to me. So that's why it's frustrating, because you can perform better. And it's not like they don't want it, right? You can tell that they really want it, but it's infuriating at times too.
I want to go back. You mentioned the USC thing. I remember even as a player, you would almost go out of your way to say how much you hated those guys as a Southern California native. Like what? Yeah. It's got to be more than just being a Notre Dame fan, though. Like what? Did you have a bad visit there as a kid? Like what?
No.
Started the hatred there.
Yeah, I mean, like, and the funny part is my dad's entire family. It's like they were USC fans, like growing up. Like a bunch of them went there. I think even on my mom's side, a bunch of people went to USC, and then like everybody at my schools growing up, massive USC people. And when I was growing up, you guys remember it was like the 10-year, Pete Carroll beatdown period.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll never forget, like we almost win the Bush Push game. And it was just painful for a very long time. And so I was a Notre Dame fan. And so being a Notre Dame fan in that time period in Southern California, it was not it was just not fun. And I just had to listen to every year about how, terrible we were and blah, 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 every possible insult you could think of. And so that's why it's like, it is very satisfying to me, whenever we are able to beat them, because for so much of my life, we were nowhere near beating them. So that's that. I mean, at the end of the day, like a lot of this is tongue in cheek. It's a great university. They have it's a great program. A lot of people played there that were awesome, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to beat them worse than anyone else that we play. So I think that's probably more of the background, why it was so sweet.
Matt sort of introed you as a former walk-on, so I was interested as you watch this team, whether it be Jordan Faison in particular. Like, do you still awesome. a certain kinship to the guys who came in? And you see where, like, I guess Davis Sherwood, Luke Talich are walk-ons and former walk-ons too. But like when you watch those guys, true. I mean, is it? Do you feel a certain like, oh God, that's my guy? Like,
no, it's awesome. I think that they've done. And by the way, I mean, like, some of these guys, like, they were highly recruited, maybe they were playing a different sport, or, something happened in the recruiting process and we ran out of spots. Like Bertrand was a very good high school football player.
Yeah. He was committed to Georgia.
This is like, he's not, he's a ball player. And I think all these guys are. And there's a bunch of walk-ons, by the way, that they mature late or they work on their craft and they get bigger and stronger. But yeah, I definitely have kinship for that. Like anyone who's been in that position of you're playing from you're so far behind already, right? And I'm not going to say that coaches want their scholarship players to work out, but they're definitely getting the first look.
Right.
Right. And so. And it's going to take you some time to generate the trust as that kind of player. So I think it's awesome to see when people like that go and get their opportunity and they seize it. So, and that's true at any program. I love seeing, the underdog kind of story, and having been been the guy who was just a cone at practice for many years, or the tackling bag at practice for many years. It's very sweet for me.
I remember your reaction almost 2 years ago now, I think, when Marcus Freeman as a coordinator showed up to practice with a Wapu Nation versus
That
everybody.
was so awesome.
Which,
But this
I guess Michigan's stolen that one with their
Yeah.
shirts lately. But I remember your reaction during that, and you knew that's when you knew Marcus Freeman probably got the place.
No,
in a way
he
that
gets the
would
place, man.
portend well.
Yeah, and like that's the stuff. I'm trying to be like diplomatic here, but like I think that he's doing such a great job of leaning into the fabric of the institution, and like he's just doing all of the little things so well, and it's why I think you just feel like, and I think you guys have written this in a couple, better than I'm going to say it now in some of your articles, but like you feel the energy of like the community at Notre Dame just like enveloping him and like trying to push him as hard as they possibly can towards success. I think Pete, you had a great article talking about this when like, Notre Dame embracing him when they beat USC in the tunnel or whatever it was, or maybe it was UMatt, I don't remember. But I think that that's the kind of feeling that he creates in the community. So, and he's that kind of leader, right? I think it's all like bona fide, legit. He is that dude, which is awesome. So.
All right. Well, Joe, thanks for hopping on with us on the Independent. You've got to go take over the world. He's Joe Schmidt, former walk-on.
If only
former
he had
captain,
NIL opportunities.
Team
by the way.
MVP.
Yeah, I know,
like,
right?
And can we describe you as future trustee as well? Like, can we just speak that into existence?
Yeah. Let's speak it into existence. I gotta do some things, I think, between now and then that hopefully create that opportunity. But no, guys, it's always so fun to jump on here and banter with you. You guys do such a great job covering the program, and I really appreciate you too.
All right, fantastic. Thanks, Joe.
Later, guys.
All right, that was former Notre Dame linebacker Joe Schmidt, one of the good guys from a media point of view. I think
fan of the show, friend of the program.
Look, the guys that I've covered in 20 years, Joe Schmidt would be on a short list of most enjoyable interviews / banter guys in the Goog. So appreciate him coming on the show and shedding a little light on Notre Dame's defense, what's working, maybe what's been a little bit better than expected, and just sort of what it's been like to be a fan. So I don't know if there's anything you got to take away from there, but if not, this weekend, what are you thinking as far as Notre Dame Wake Forest? You sort of tipped your hand about what could be a big win, segment one.
Yeah, I mean, the line is 24.5 right now. I don't even know what the over-under is. I mean, it's probably not much higher than that based on Wake's offense. It is 46.5 right now. And there is a lot of money coming in on Wake Forest, but that does not scare me off. I think Notre Dame, I think this resembles a pick game more than not. I think the defense has a field day here. I think the offense is sound. Hopefully no turnovers. That would be nice. But I think Notre Dame wins this one fairly easy. I'll say 38-10.
Yeah, even 10 feels like a big number for Wake Forest with a first-time starting quarterback coming in here against this defense. Like, it would not surprise me if this looked a little bit more like the Boston College game from last year, which I think was 44-0.
That's right. They have back-to-back shutouts on Senior Day.
Yeah, Georgia Tech before that, right? So I'll say Wake Forest gets 3, but it's 44-3. I think Notre Dame will throttle them this weekend. I think that Notre Dame probably has a lot of angst to get out. I could also see the game being 7-3 at the end of the first quarter, and then Notre Dame just like puts it on them after they sort of get the Senior Day junk out, and Sam Hartman was like, "Oh yeah, I play for Notre Dame," like, and then just they put it on him. I think the weather is supposed to be all right. Let me pull this up. Saturday, high of 48 and sunny. No rain in the forecast as it stands. But, I mean, look, it was a legit blizzard last year, and they just destroyed Boston College. I think Michael Kern is going to have a very rough afternoon. And
bad weather would work to Notre Dame's advantage here in theory. When I was at ESPN, I think I spent 6 years tracking the senior day weather forecast because it was literally like, this year it's a blizzard. This year it's 70 and sunny. You just don't know what you're going to get in the Midwest in mid-November, which is part of the fun. But regardless of how it turns out on Saturday in the skies, even Pittsburgh, as bad as they are, like they showed against Louisville, like they're capable of rising up and having a really good performance out of the blue. I don't know if I've seen that. And I know Wake beat Pitt, but that was a very interesting game. I just don't, this is not a good Wake Forest team, relative to the standards Dave Clawson has set there. And I just, I don't see how they keep up with Notre Dame. And I think as long as Notre Dame jumped out to an early lead and put some pressure on Michael Kern, it's going to be very, very tough sledding for the Deacs.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So I guess we will wrap up this episode of The Independent there. Matt and I will be back this weekend after Notre Dame's senior day game against Wake Forest. Recap that, maybe a slight look ahead to Stanford a week following. It's been an interesting way to wrap up the season. I think that the Stanford game feels like a bit trickier than either of us would have thought in the summer. But I'm not sure if it's tricky enough, but who knows, like Notre Dame's road performances this year have left a ton to be desired. So there'll be plenty to get into the Stanford Thanksgiving week performance for Notre Dame after this weekend against Wake Forest. But Matt and I will wrap up the home slate of the season with the Independent post Notre Dame Wake Forest. Thanks again for listening to the show. Again, podcast available on Apple, Spotify. You can follow our YouTube stream, like, subscribe, rate, review. All that helps with people finding out more about the Independent. So until Saturday early evening, when Matt and I get back together, you've been listening to the Independent. Thanks for being with us.